Okay, back to the St. Lawrence Seaway and the men who discovered this river long before LaSalle. You will notice the slide reads St. Lawrence River, but there is some confusion about the titles Seaway and River, and I will clear that up for you today. First of all, both terms are correct, but there are differences. The St. Lawrence River is a natural stream that flows out of Lake Ontario into the sea. It has done that since the last ice age, and it has always been a way to the sea, as most rivers are. But it has not always been a navigable way to the sea. By navigable, I mean a waterway that can handle heavy commercial traffic. When changes were made to the river to make the whole thing navigable, that is when it became known as the St. Lawrence Seaway. In reality, there is no one single definition of what makes up the St. Lawrence Seaway. Some say it is only the portion of the river that has locks in it. Others say that it is the seaway that stretches all the way from Lake Ontario to the St. Lawrence Gulf. And even more of the others say St. Lawrence Seaway to be all of the Great Lakes and the river combined. That definition would include all waters from Duluth, Minnesota, marked with the red arrow, to the Atlantic Ocean, also marked with the red arrow. So, and you can see right here, this is the section with just the locks in it. All the Great Lakes drain into the St. Lawrence Seaway. The actual surface area of the Great Lakes on this map is the area in dark blue, is 94,250 miles. That's an area equal to the size of the United Kingdom. The lakes make up approximately 20% of Earth's freshwater surface. There was some confusion and conflicting information around facts, and this particular claim gets thrown around a lot. You will hear some Niagara guides say the lake contains over 20% of all the Earth's fresh water, and some other guys will say 20% of freshwater surface. Now, Google tells me that it is 20% of the freshwater surface, and I know that you know the internet is a trustworthy source of information. Each of the lakes have a drainage basin, as shown here. The colored areas around each lake represent the rivers and streams that flow into it. And the lakes then flow into the St. Lawrence. The entire basin covers nearly 200,000 square miles. That is an area nearly as big as France. Now, I've told you the story of LaSalle and how he explored the area, but long before LaSalle, there was Jacques Cartier. Jacques Cartier is an important man in Canadian history, and his image can be found all over Canada. You will find him on money, postage stamps, and lots of statues. Cartier was famous for finding and eventually exploring the St. Lawrence River. He faced many challenges, but still managed to accomplish a great deal. However, he did have some failures and some very questionable methods. Cartier was born in the seaport of Saint-Malo, France. He studied navigation and became a highly respected navigator. Cartier had several missions in America. In 1524, he was sent to discover a route to China for France, but instead, he stumbled upon the east coast of North America. Oops. The Iroquois Indians that Cartier encountered had a word for village. The word was Kanata. Cartier then took the word and called his new land Brilliant. I think maybe he just couldn't pronounce Kanata, so it became Canada. This map is Cartier's first voyage in 1524. But you will notice, Cartier did not go up what would become known as the St. Lawrence River. He did find and name the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The story goes that he was spending the night on the north shore of this unknown body of water in the New World, and it happened to be August 10th, the feast day of St. Lawrence. So who is St. Lawrence? St. Lawrence is the patron saint of librarians, cooks, butchers, the common people. The Roman Emperor Valerian, who had killed the Pope, had ordered St. Lawrence to bring him all the riches of the Catholic Church. And instead of bags of gold, he brought the poor and disabled people that the church had been giving money to support. He said, "These people, these are the treasures of the church." And for that act, St. Lawrence was roasted on a gridiron. He was a man who stood up for the value of the common man. So that is where the name St. Lawrence Gulf comes from. The river itself went through several names, but was eventually named after the Gulf. As he sailed around the Gulf, he discovered the Magdalen and Prince Edward Islands. He also crossed the Gaspé Peninsula and took possession of it for France, but he did not find a northwest passage. 10 years later, in 1534, King Francis I of France commissioned Cartier to go back and look for the northwest passage. He gave Cartier 2 small ships and 61 crew members. Cartier left in April, and in less than 3 weeks, he was sailing down the coast of Newfoundland. Cartier's goals were to find a route to Asia, and if you remember, this was the prime goal of his last voyage. Now the king had added these additional goals: bring back riches, preferably in gold, take possession of the territory for France, set up a French colony, and casually convert the natives to Roman Catholicism. No biggie. This map shows the second trip to North America, and in this second voyage, he found a northwest passage that took him up the St. Lawrence River. Cartier and his men went up the river and found a native village called Hochelaga. They were welcomed by the natives, and they climbed a high hilltop. Cartier named it Montreal, or Mount Real, which eventually became known as Montreal. As you can see pictured here is the cross that Cartier erected with the Indians. The cross has been replaced many times and it is still present. The more modern version is complete with LED lighting. Rapids prevented further progress up the St. Lawrence River, so Cartier decided to spend the winter at the base he had established. It was a harsh winter that proved disastrous because the Iroquois people, who were initially friendly, grew more and more angry with these European invaders. In spring, Cartier decided to go back to France and take Chief Donnacona with him, so that the chief could personally tell of a country said to be full of gold, rubies, and other treasures. For some reason, Donnacona suddenly decided not to go. Cartier felt he really needed the chief, so in May of 1536, Cartier kidnapped Chief Donnacona and 9 others. This is what we mean by questionable methods. It was an arduous trip down the St. Lawrence, followed by a 3-week Atlantic crossing. Cartier arrived with Donnacona and the others in Saint-Malo, France on July 15, 1536. Sadly, 4 years later, Chief Donnacona never returned home and died of scurvy in France in 1539. Cartier returned once again in 1541, but this time he experienced even more conflict with the Iroquois, and 35 of his men were killed. The third voyage ended without any notable accomplishments. The map here is the Isle of Montreal. As you can see, it truly is an island, surrounded by the waters of the St. Lawrence River on the south, and what is now known as Lake of Two Mountains on the west, which is here, it's in French, and the Prairies River along the north side, which is this skinny little one here. Navigation above Montreal was made very difficult, if not impossible, by the Lachine Rapids, once again, onto China. This was as far as Cartier was able to go up the St. Lawrence River because of these swift and rocky rapids. Most vessels had to be carried up the rapids. The only way to navigate the entire St. Lawrence River would to be eventually find a method of bypassing them. Some would risk shooting the rapids downstream, but making one's way upstream through the rapids was impossible. Throughout the 1600s, multiple plans for a canal to bypass the rapids were created. It wasn't until many decades later that a successful canal would be built. Planning of the successful Lachine Canal took place between 1815 and 1821, with the actual construction between 1821 and 1825. Without the modern equipment we have today, the canal was built mainly with picks and shovels. Heavy lifting was done with the use of blocks and tackles on booms for leverage. The last of 7 locks with 5-foot depths was finally completed in 1825 and ready for vessels to lock through. As you can imagine, a 5-foot depth really isn't much, so you couldn't really get a very big ship through there. You couldn't get us through here, that's for sure. As time passed, vessels became large with a deeper draft. They outgrew the canal and locked chambers, forcing those who dared once again to shoot the rapids. Don't worry guys, we've already gone through our rapids. They were much bigger than that, but you guys didn't even wake up last night, you didn't notice. Some made it through and some did not, as you can see in this image of a side-wheeler riverboat. An enlargement of the canal was completed in 1850, allowing larger vessels to again bypass the rapids. Enlargement of the Lachine Canal brought lots of new industry to the banks. This launched Canada's Industrial Revolution. Pictured here is Canada Sugar Refining Company. The Lachine Rapids are still there, and those who would like to experience them can do so. And there are several jet boat outfitters in the area offering opportunities for a thrilling and wet ride in the rapids. By 1949, public interest had grown in an even deeper waterway on the St. Lawrence River, and in 1954, Parliament established the St. Lawrence Seaway Authority. It was set in place to construct a deep draft waterway between the Port of Montreal and Lake Erie. They would also build the international bridges that would cross it. In 1954, ground was finally broken for this massive project. Notice the logo on the project clearly shows a cooperative effort between Canada and the US. As you can see up here, we've got the maple leaf and the star. It's kind of a cool logo. This kind of cooperation between two countries is rare in history. Also notice the banner on stage shows Uncle Sam shaking hands with a Royal Canadian Mounted Policeman. Right there, you can see that. Seven locks would be built on the river as part of the St. Lawrence Seaway. They would also build the Welland Canal locks, creating a more useful bypass of Niagara Falls. The Sioux locks were then created for navigation to and from Lake Superior. Pictured here is one of the locks under construction. This is Lambert Lock. It was built to bypass the Lachine Rapids, and it led to the closing of the Lachine Canal. Anybody know who that is? Yes. Yep, the St. Lawrence Seaway was officially opened by Queen Elizabeth and President Eisenhower on June 26, 1959. Here's another picture of them. Every lock drew a great crowd, including this ship passing through Lambert Lock at Montreal. You can see here the people standing on the bow of the ship. Right here. And these are all the spectators. Lake Superior is the deepest and highest of all the Great Lakes. The most dramatic drop is from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario through the 8 Welland Canal locks. The total drop is 326 feet. From Lake Ontario to the sea are the final 7 locks on the St. Lawrence River. Lake Superior is the highest, and the total elevation drop from Superior is 180 meters, or just over 600 feet. That's as high as a 60-story building. All in all, this is an amazing part of the world, and the St. Lawrence Seaway is a vital part of the economy in the entire North American continent. I hope you enjoyed this wonderful river as we head out to the Atlantic Ocean. Thank you all for coming today. That concludes today's presentation on LaSalle and the Seaway. Thank you all very much.
Tell them what's happening next.
What is happening?
And so just be careful as you're moving about today. And I know that seems an obvious thing, but just do take special extra care. Are you videoing me?
Yes.
Oh, all right. Is this for legal reasons?
Yeah.
Just do please take extra care as you're walking around today. And I know that seems obvious thing to state, but just as a reminder, Also, a couple of you have asked, what's that landmass that's out there? That is Prince Edward Island. And so that's how close we're trying to stay to Prince Edward Island. So we're hanging close to the shore and making our way around that so that we can go in the inlet on the other side. So we are steady making it around. But good morning and welcome. The Gulf of St. Lawrence is an incredibly diverse and complex marine ecosystem, one of the largest of its kind in the world. It's a busy and productive part of the ocean that has a unique set of species that come here year-round, and then others like whales come here and they visit just this special spot. There you go. Now you can see the Gulf of St. Lawrence for those of you who haven't really studied this map before you came. Here's the St. Lawrence River, which is what we came up. This area is made up of fresh water from the St. Lawrence River system emptying out into the Atlantic Ocean, where it combines with the cold Labrador current from the Arctic and the warm Gulf Stream from the tropics, and all of these currents merge together in a semi-enclosed and mostly shallow area. The average depth is 200 feet, and at its deepest it's 1,500 feet, and it just creates the perfect conditions for very, very diverse life. Do you need to make an announcement? Hi. Okay. All right. So if you were like me and you heard the term Labrador, your mind probably went, aww. Isn't that sweet? So that Labrador is a dog, but it also turns out that it's also a province in Canada, up there at the top. You might be guessing that that's where the dog comes from, and you would be close. It actually comes from here. It's an offshoot of the breed, the St. John's water dog, but they still call it a Labrador. As you can see, that is St. John's. And so it's an offshoot of that breed. The Gulf of St. Lawrence is approximately 97,000 square miles. It's an inland sea receiving an average of 350,000 cubic feet of fresh water from the St. Lawrence River. It's connected to the Atlantic by the Strait of Belle. And what?
Strait of Belle. It's the Strait of Belle.
It's the Strait of Belle?
Yes.
All right, there you go. Very good, thank you. You can tell I don't.
Well, yeah, it's okay. We're Canadians.
And the Cabot Strait, or is it Cabot? Thank you. Well, I was just checking. Strait of Belle and the Cabot Strait. The Gulf of St. Lawrence, combined with the St. Lawrence River and the entire Seaway, forms a transportation corridor to the heartland of industrial North America, which lies along the shores of the Great Lakes. It also carries away all of its waste products and still yields about 1/4 of the catch of Canadian fish and seafood industry. The Gulf of St. Lawrence is a genuine open-air buffet for whales. A dozen or so species do frequent the region on visits in the spring and fall, and one does reside here year-round. We saw it a couple of days ago. Do you remember what it was? It is the beluga. Every spring, thousands of different species enter the St. Lawrence because it's teeming with fish and plankton. Its feeding is the main activity in the summer. But the beluga spends its entire life there. Before we get to any destinations that we are going to on this cruise, there is one blaring piece of land in the Gulf that should be pointed out. And it's somewhere that we are not going. It is the largest island found more or less there in the center of the Gulf, and this is Anticosti Island. It's the 90th largest island in the world. It's larger than Prince Edward Island, but very sparsely populated, only approximately 240 people. and most of them are in Port Meniere on the western tip of the island. They are mainly lighthouse keepers and government workers, and due to the more than 400 shipwrecks off of its coasts, Anticosti is sometimes called the Cemetery of the Gulf. But in the center of the island is Anticosti National Park. It has lakes and rivers. It has deep gorges and canyons with powerful waterfalls and caves, white-tailed deer in the woods, salmon in the waters, and seals getting suntans on the beach. Anticosti Island is considered one of Canada's most precious jewels, and I think we can see why. But we're not going there. So absorb the picture. Isn't that gorgeous though? Oh my gosh. All right. This is Prince Edward Island, and it is Canada's smallest province, making up just 0.1% of Canada's total land area. It has a total population of 146,000. It's here in the Gulf of St. Lawrence and separated from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick by the Northumberland Strait. It's right there, Northumberland Strait.
Can I offer you a little funny thing? This island has 10,000 people less than my small city, and it sends 4 senators to our parliament. Our city spends 0 senators.
Prince Edward Island was discovered by Jacques Cartier in 1534, and he named it the Isle of St. John. He described it as the fairest land that may possibly be seen. In 1763, the British gained the island from France under the terms of the Treaty of Paris. They changed the name in 1798 to Prince Edward Island to distinguish it from the town of St. John, Newfoundland, and it's named after Prince Edward, the 4th son of King George III and the father of Queen Victoria. Its most striking feature is the deep red soil. And in places, the reddish-brown soil is broken by outcroppings of a red-colored sandstone. That was a little dramatic. The heavy conditions of iron oxides in the rock and soil give the land its distinctive reddish-brown hue. The coastline is decorated with beautiful tidal inlets and red sand beaches, which seem to be quite popular in the summertime. Charlottetown is the largest city of Prince Edward Island with a population of 36,000. At one time, the city was a major port, but in recent years, the number of vessels entering the port has declined. However, efforts by several agencies have resulted in regular visits by summer cruise vessels. Here's 2 more wonderful pictures of Charlottetown. Looks like a beautiful little place that we're headed. Agriculture is one of the province's most important industries, and nearly half the island's land is dedicated to farming. Potatoes are the most important crop. Fishing is also an important resource for the land. The total value of the catch increased by 37% from 2009 to 2012. And lobster is by far the most valuable species. There you see lots of lobster traps. Oh, there it is, lobster. In 2012, the value of lobster was $114 million, more than double the value of other shellfish, including scallops and oysters. Any oyster fans here? I love oysters, yeah. Historically, another important industry in the western part of the island was the harvesting of Irish moss. Irish moss is a marine plant that has to be processed to get something called carrageenan. Yeah, well, you say it. Go ahead. Carrageenan. I had to look it up because I'd never heard of it. And I discovered that carrageenan is an emulsifying and stabilizing agent that's used in many food products, such as ice cream.
Really?
You got seafood in your ice cream, people. Isn't that a lovely thought? This classic children's story, Anne of Green Gables, was set in Prince Edward Island, and it was written by the author Lucy Maud Montgomery. And Miss Montgomery does live on Prince Edward Island. And the most historic site on Prince Edward Island is the Province House, a government house and home of the Lieutenant Governor, and it's carefully refurbished early 19th century building. The Confederation Bridge, which opened in 1997, joins New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island. It is an 8-mile-long bridge which takes about 12 minutes to cross, and it holds the world's record as the longest bridge over ice-covered water. It's pretty, isn't it? All right. Another site that we'll be going to on this particular trip is the Canso Canal. You might remember this map right here. And the Canso Canal is located right there. So let me get a little closer in so that you can see what we're looking at. There we go. So you might have a good idea of the Canso Strait. It separates Nova Scotia Peninsula from Cape Breton from Cape Breton Island, spelled differently. Its long and thin natural channel is about 17 miles long and averages about 1.5 miles wide, but in one place it's only a half-mile wide at its most narrow, and it's very deep. It's around 200 feet deep. This natural divide caused a lot of economic problems for the entire area. Ferries were difficult in the area and not very efficient, so they decided to build something to cross the strait. And in 1903, the proposal was made to build a bridge, a 4,370-foot bridge at the narrowest place in the strait, but the cost ended up being too much for the immediate moment. And then, of course, we know what happened in the 1920s and the 1930s. And so finally, the Strait of Canso was permanently blocked on December the 10th of 1954 for the construction of a causeway to allow cars and trains to pass over the strait. And that's what it looks like. On the eastern side of the causeway, they put a canal to be able to keep the ships passing through the strait, because as you can see, no ship is going to be passing right there. So there's a canal right here at the end that allows the ships to be able to go through. It's a short canal. It's only 1,870 feet long. It has a lock that accounts for any tile differences in the strait. And in order for the cars to be able to go over the canal, they put a swinging bridge over the canal. We will be going through that little canal there. So you might, once we are heading into that canal, you might want to run out to the in front of the ship so that you can watch the bridge. Open up. Going through the strait saves us about 200 miles of travel around Cape Breton Island and on to Halifax. Halifax is the capital of Nova Scotia. It is a population of 403,000 people. Although Halifax is in Canada, it's actually closer by miles to Dublin, Ireland than to Vancouver. The map is not accurate, obviously, but it is. It's a young city. The median age is 39. That's young. Median age is 39. 59% of the population is under 45. They're going to know we're here. It's a good time city. There are more pubs per capita in Halifax than in any other city in Canada. Halifax has a direct connection to the Titanic. As you can see from this map, the Titanic had left Europe and was on its way to New York when she went down 400 miles off of the coast. Because of the proximity to Halifax, many of the dead were taken there. And so, the Maritime Museum in Halifax has a permanent exhibition about the Titanic. It has lots of artifacts from the ship, so that'll be an interesting thing if you get a chance. And then this is a picture of the SS Mont Blanc, and I'm going to tell you its story. It was a bright and freezing morning, on December the 6th of 1917, when a French captain steered this ship into the channel leading to the piers of Halifax. What he didn't expect to see at 8:30 in the morning was the SS Norwegian headed right toward him on his side of the Skinny Narrows. The two massive ships blasted their whistles and attempted a few maneuvers, but then collided bow to bow. The collision itself would have been a pretty major fender bender, but would not normally have led to the devastating accident that it became. Because on the decks of the Mont Blanc were barrels of benzol, which is a highly flammable substance. And in the collision, sparks happened, and the barrels were broken open, and when the ships collided, the benzol began burning and pouring out everywhere. Most of the French crew from the Mont Blanc managed to get into rowboats and make it to shore. But they were maddened and running around screaming in French, and few people at the time spoke French in Halifax, and no one knew what they were saying. The fire in the harbor grew, and people from the town started running to the harbor to see what had happened. The helpless Mont Blanc drifted towards Pier 6, further and further in, billowing with black smoke. The Halifax fighters raced towards the scene of the accident, and because it was so cold, people who lived all along the harbor were at their windows, peering out through the glass, watching all of the commotion. And the Mont Blanc carried no special markings. Almost no one knew what filled her compartments, except of the few of the port officers and, of course, her crew, those screaming, mad Frenchmen that no one understood. What the Emu had rammed was a 3,000-ton floating bomb. The Mont Blanc was crammed with munitions that were bound for the raging war in Europe, and its holds were packed with 2,500 tons of TNT. The resulting blast was the biggest man-made explosion of the pre-atomic age. You can see right there. It leveled more than a square mile of waterfront, killing 2,000 people and injuring 5,000 more, 12% of Halifax population. This is a picture of an 1,100-pound chunk of the Mont Blanc anchor that still lies where it landed 2.5 miles away. 1,100 pounds, 2.5 miles away. The initial shock wave leveled the surrounding blocks. More than 1,600 houses were instantly destroyed. 12,000 more were damaged. Tens of thousands of windows were blown inward, with shards of glass shredding the many shocked faces peering out the windows. 37 people were blinded entirely immediately, and 250 more lost at least an eye. Iron shrapnel peppered the city, and to this day, gardeners still pick up hunks of metal from the glass. The Mont Blanc's cannon landed almost 3 miles away. This is a picture of the town's cathedral. There's really no good way to end this story, but it's an important part of their history that needs to be acknowledged. And so instead of trying to create a good ending, I think it's just best to acknowledge this was a horrible day in Halifax, and one that it took a really long time to recover from. So I'm just going to think about Peggy's Cove Lighthouse, one of the most photographed and beautiful places on Nova Scotia. That's just easier for me to picture. Isn't that lovely? On to Portland. Portland is in Maine, and of course, Maine is known for lots of things. It's known for its beautiful mountain scenery, for its dramatic ocean scenery, and along the famous coast you're going to find lighthouses and sandy beaches, quiet fishing villages, and thousands of offshore islands, and of course, lobster. Doesn't that look delicious? Yep. And it looks exactly like you would expect a Maine lobster to look. But check this out. You also have spotted lobsters, and one lobster right here, which is split, red on one side and dark on the other. Isn't that crazy? Genetics is a beautiful thing. You've got a blue lobster there. Isn't that fun? And you've got albino lobsters. And just when you think you've got it all covered, along comes the cotton candy lobster. She's only for dessert. Yeah. But you can only eat her from dessert when you finished off one of these. I believe this is where the term lobster steak comes from. One last lobster pick, please indulge me. And it's time to leave Maine. We're going to Gloucester. Welcome to America's oldest fishing port. A popular phrase in American restaurants has become farm to table, and Gloucester proudly exclaims, ocean to table. Anything fresher is still swimming. You will also find the Fisherman's Memorial Statue. It's known as the Man at the Wheel statue and was built in 1925. It's an 8-foot tall bronze statue of a fisherman dressed in oilskins and standing braced at the wheel on the sloping deck of his ship. You can see his deck is sloping. I'm sure this is exactly what our captain is doing upstairs right now. It's positioned so that he's looking out over the harbor. He's supposed to look like he's facing a windstorm and headed towards dangerous rock. His eyes are fixed, while every muscle is strained to hold onto the wheel. He is purposefully left in a rough finish to give him a rugged look, and it has an inscription from Psalm 107 which reads, "They that go down to the sea in ships," with dates 1623 to 1923. Here's a picture of the City Hall, built in 1871. Gloucester is located on Cape Ann in Massachusetts. It's one of the first English settlements in what would become the Massachusetts Bay Colony. It predates Boston, 1630. And in 1626, it was completely abandoned. When the people moved to what would become Salem, the soil there in Salem was much more fertile for growing. But at some point, the area was slowly resettled and finally reincorporated in 1642 to the city of Gloucester. It took its name from the city of the same name in southwest England. And Gloucester is a place filled with history and lots of gorgeous old homes. Isn't that beautiful? And check this one out. Isn't that lovely? And as much as I love Palm Springs, I think here in Gloucester, I finally found a dream house where I could actually be happy because they do have boathouses. Doesn't that look like that is so me. That is perfect. All right. Thank you everyone for coming, and we will be having a Liars Club at 10:30 right here. So I hope you'll just hang out for a few minutes. I just got called to the bridge. That was what he was asking for me to do. Yes, I've been called to the bridge at 10 o'clock. So enjoy a few moments and we'll come back, or just I hope you'll stick around. Liars Club for those of you who haven't played, and for those of you who have played, tell your neighbors it's a lot of fun. And we hope to have a big group of you for Liars Club at 10:30. All right? Thank you for coming.